First, you need to draw or trace your stencil onto your black canvas or other black surface. So you can see here I cut out the main part of my sketch, which is the body of the flamingo. I didn't bother trying to cut out the pieces that were just lines, which were the legs. I am just going to trace the body on with a white colored pencil, and then I will just look at my sketch or look at my original reference to draw the lines of the leg back in. My next step is to mix my lightest tint. So I am going to use a clean brush and I am going to scoop some white paint from my cup into my palette. You can also use the plate you are working on, whatever we are using for your paint. You want to make sure you have a pretty good amount of white because we want this first tint to be very, very light. So I have my white first, and then I'm going to get a clean brush again, and I'm going to just dip the tip into my color. I'm using pink, so you can see I just dipped the tip of my brush into the pink paint, and you can see how quickly even that very, very small amount of color changed the white to a nice light tint. As we get ready to paint, there are a couple things you need to pay attention to. You want your brush to be wet, and you want to make sure you load your brush with a lot of paint, more than you normally would. Notice as I paint over my lines that I am dragging the brush. I am bracing my hand against the table, against the canvas to keep it stable. And as I paint, I am turning the canvas so that I can continue pulling or dragging the brush to get my lines as smooth as possible. It's also important to really take your time when you are doing this painting. This part I am showing you now is not sped up because I want you to notice that I am painting very slowly here. I am dragging the brush slowly. If I drag it quickly, my lines will be wiggly or they will be scratchy. I do not expect us to have perfectly clean lines. If you zoom in on my lines, they are not perfectly clean and smooth, but we want our lines to be as smooth as we can get them. So to make our lines smooth, it is important that we keep our brush just a little bit wet, that we are loading a lot of paint onto our brush, and that we are going slowly and turning the canvas so that we can continue bracing our hand and dragging our brush whichever way is easiest for us to get nice smooth lines. Don't worry if your lines are not perfect on this first pass or if you feel like you can see too much of the black paint through. This is one step that we will definitely want to do a second coat on at the end. And as we paint our next layer around the outside of this, we will also be able to fix any mistakes that we might have made on this first line. Now that I've painted my center line, I'm going to prepare my main color or my hue, my pure color. I'm going to scoop a large amount of that color onto my plate or my paint palette, and I am actually not going to use the pure color because the pure colors do not always get good coverage on a black background. So what I am going to do is make this a very subtle tint, which means I'm going to mix just a very small amount of white into my pink. So instead of using the pure hue, I'm making it a little bit of a tint because I am going to get much better coverage over the black background, and I will not have to do as many layers. Once I have a good color and I am ready to paint, I am going to grab one of the very small round brushes again, and I am going to make sure I dip it in water and I load a good amount of paint on it before I start. With this next color, I am going all the way around my lightest color. Now here you're going to see me make a mistake. My brush is too wet and I'm not getting good coverage. So I'm just going to grab a sponge or paper towel. I'm going to dry it off quickly and I should be in good shape now. So you can see I am still taking my time. I am dragging my brush and bracing my hands, but I am making sure that I am touching that center line, that very light line. I do not want to leave any black space between my colors. I want them to be right up next to each other, touching each other. It is better for you to go over your center line a little bit with your bright color than it is to leave a black line in the middle. Make sure you are going around the inside and the outside of your lines. So here you can see I have to go on both sides of the lines for the legs and feet. And when I get to the body and the head, you will see I have to do the inside and the outside. I am going to speed up the rest of this part for you to see, but pay attention to the speed that I am painting at now, because you want to make sure you are taking your time and going slowly so you can get your lines nice and smooth. If you have small sections like this in the legs, you might have to fill them in completely. That is okay. You will see when I get to the neck as well, it will probably end up getting filled in completely. Now that we have our tint and our color outline, we are going to mix our first shade. Make sure you are going back to your pure color for your shade. You do not want to have any white mixed into this, and you need to make sure you are using a lot of your color and only a tiny amount of black. The black goes very far. When I dip my brush in, I am literally just getting a dot right at the end. I barely have any black paint. It is just a little bit at the end of my brush. That is all I need. And you will see as soon as I start mixing it into the pink paint that the color is going to change very, very quickly. And even that tiny amount of black paint makes my pink much, much darker. When I start painting, I am following the same process I've followed with my color on the last layer. I am painting around the whole outline. I am making sure that my shade is going right up to my hue. I want my lines or my layers to touch each other. I do not want to leave any black spaces in between my shades of color. So again, I am taking my time, I am going slowly, I am bracing my hand, and I am frequently getting more paint. So anytime that you are working on this painting and it is getting scratchy, which means you're dragging your brush and you're seeing a lot of the background through, you need to get more paint. All right, so we don't need to worry about stretching our paint or spreading it super far. We want to keep our small brushes nice and loaded up with paint because that will help us with our smooth lines. So you can see how often I am putting more paint on my brush. You can see that I am bracing my hand and that I am taking my time as I carefully drag my brush around the outline. I'm going to speed up the rest of this step again for you to see, especially as we get to the inside of the head. You are going to start seeing that this shade is going to start filling in a lot more space, but make sure you are paying attention to how slowly I am painting now, and that you are taking your time and painting slowly on your piece. Finally, we are going to mix up our last darkest shade. Now, I have enough paint left from my previous shade that I can just add a little more black to it. If you do not, you might need to start over with your pure color, your hue, and just add a little bit more black. It still does not take much black to get a much darker color than your last one. This is such a dark pink here that it is actually a little bit hard to see on the video, except that it is, you know, shinier than the canvas. But once it dries, it will be brighter. Even if your last shade here is a little bit tricky to see, that's okay. As long as it is not black, as long as it has some color in it, it is going to really help and contribute to the glowing effect. At the bottom of my canvas here, you can see I'm starting to run into a part that was messed up a little bit. Don't worry if the background of your canvas gets messy or messed up. Just keep continuing with your painting and we will touch up the background at the end of the project. You can see that I am just continuing to paint this shade pretty much the same way as I painted the rest of the piece. I am taking my time dragging the brush and making sure that my darkest shade is going right up to the edge or overlapping my previous shade. You also need to make sure you are going on the inside of shapes. I still have the inside of the flamingo's body here to paint in, and it looks like I am going to be able to leave just a little sliver of the black still in there. Finally, all I have left is touch-ups, so I am going to fix the background of my canvas anywhere I need to with black paint. And I highly recommend that everyone go over that center tint again. So you can see that a lot of black was showing through on mine, and you really want that center line to feel nice and bright because that's the light. So you want to remix that and go over that line again no matter what. I am also going to go over my second line, my hue, with another coat of paint because I feel like too much black is showing through there as well. You can do as many coats as you feel like you need to get good coverage. Just try to keep your paint smooth. You don't want it getting too thick and clumpy. And it's important to let your painting dry in between coats. So that might mean waiting until next class to do your next coat, but the results will definitely be worth it.